Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. The college football playoff first rankings were released, and I want to discuss them because the college football playoff and these guys, and we talk about the human element and the fact that they're able to watch these games and stuff like that, and they're able to decipher who's really better. But clearly, when these initial rankings come out, I don't necessarily think that's like what they are doing, because you cannot tell me what you've seen from Ohio State is better than what you've seen from Georgia or Michigan. And I want to talk to those people that can give me good reasons outside the fact that they beat two top 15 teams. But Penn State's not a top 15 team. That team's not good. Their offense is awful. They almost lost to Indiana on the road or at home. They are not a top 15 team, and that game was as ugly as possible. Ohio State probably should have lost to Notre Dame on the road. So are we really hanging your hat on those two victories that are probably maybe borderline top 15 teams, and they kind of skated by, one of them being at home and one of them being on the road? Like, there's no way you can convince me that if you're watching the same football as me, that they've been more impressive than Georgia or more impressive than Michigan. And then you get it, you move further down here, you got Louisville up at 13. Nobody thinks Louisville's a top 13 team. No, there's no way you can think that. You got Michigan at 12 or Missouri at 12, who lost to LSU at home, and LSU then at 14. I get they have two losses, but one of those was week 1 to Florida State, and the other was an overtime loss to the top 10 team in the country. Like, what are we really doing here? Like, and then does head-to-head matter, because you have Texas ranked ahead of Oklahoma when those two teams played on a neutral site? So there's no rhyme or reason to what they're doing. But I don't even think they really care, because they know it's all going to sort itself out. So I think they just kind of throw these out there just to create publicity, because at the end of it, they seem to really focus on the 4 best teams. But the initial ranking always has these puzzling things where you're like, okay, that's not right. And there's several cases here in the top 15 teams.
See, I think there is a rhyme and reason. It might look like chaos, but I don't think that's the case. I do agree with you that it doesn't make any sense today based on what we've seen. But here, just let me tinfoil hat time. This is just a theory and it's far out there. Just hear me out. They're not making rankings for today. They're making rankings for tomorrow, for the next week, for the week after that. LSU beats Bama this upcoming week. LSU beats Bama. Now they have something to say. Well, Missouri lost to LSU, but they were ahead of them. Well, now LSU jumps Ole Miss, but Ole Miss beat LSU. Well, we did this last week. And that's the sort of thing, is that I think that maybe they're kind of just, the Texas in front of Oklahoma. I think that they're just kind of giving themselves some leeway further down the road, so that when push comes to shove and something like this actually does matter, and the last week's and the conference championship week rankings, that they kind of have something to point back to. Because listen, they have to answer for these. After every single rankings, they have a spokesperson go out there and kind of explain the gist of what the committee thought, talked through, and then came to a conclusion. So we do get answers, which I absolutely love. It's a way better system, in my opinion, than the BCS computer model. But I do think that they're kind of trying to give themselves a little leeway now, so that they have, explanations for why a certain team, say a 2-loss SEC champion, is ahead of a 1-loss Big Ten runner-up, say Michigan or Ohio State, something like that, so that they have, well, we had them back there, but then they faltered. And I just think that it's more of a long game, and there's more to it than just them trying to create. Maybe they are trying to create a little bit of publicity. I would not doubt that one bit. But I do think there is a bit of a rhyme and reason, and it's more chess than it is checkers.
See, I think it's more about creating matchups today. You get Missouri and Georgia. They are probably assuming Georgia is going to walk Missouri like a dog in between the hedges, and they're going to be out of this this college football playoff altogether. But this week you get a 2 versus 12 matchup or something like that. And, and then they know that Georgia has 3 pretty big games upcoming where they can walk Missouri like a dog and then jump over Ohio State and be number 1. But right now you have that controversy that we can talk to. Oh, they don't have any top 15 wins. Okay, now they get one this week. Then they jump Ohio State. I just think there's a lot of just like other conversations being had, whether it's down the road, like you're talking about, or creating press now and then just like, creating top 15 matchups so Georgia can get one this week and then jump Ohio State, rather than just looking at the 15 teams and what we've seen so far and just being like, okay, this, and this. Because if they just did that, there's no way Ohio State's number 1. There's no way LSU is behind Missouri. There's no way Louisville's number 13. Like, there's a lot of things that would be totally different that we all disagree with. I mean, you could put Louisville ahead of Notre Dame, but there's just a lot of things. But it's interesting. I always remind people, and if you watch the College Football Lock show, and if you watched our show yesterday when we did some of our leans, the dogs are going to be barking this week. Chaos is upon us. November is where chaos comes. There's rivalry games. There's big SEC matchups. We've got a ton this week. Like, all of this stuff is going to sort itself out. And I know everyone loves to play the game. Well, what if this happens? And what if this happens? Does Texas get in over Alabama if they both go undefeated and everybody else goes undefeated? And that's the final 4 spots. You know what? That's probably not going to happen. And especially if you look around the landscape of college football this year, where we've talked about this profusely over the entire season, there are no fantastic elite Georgias and Alabamas of the past. Now, Georgia looks really good, but are they as good as the last 2 years? I think we would both say they're probably not. Everyone is just kind of really good, but not great. And you know what happens to really good, but not great teams at some point during the season? They lose a game. So chaos is upon us. I can promise you that. If 4 teams go undefeated right now, I'll end this show. There's no way 4 teams are going undefeated.
I don't disagree. Well, I could just absolutely guarantee that 4 teams won't go undefeated, and it has everything to do with the Pac-12. I mean, Washington is going to lose at least 1 game. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost 2 games. I think that a Pac-12 champion, 1 loss, Oregon's coming out of that. But more importantly, it's November. This is when chaos erupts. And it has more to do with the fact that the teams have started to figure out who they are. The LSU opener that they lost to Florida State, this is not the same LSU team. And if you don't watch them, I'm here to tell you, this isn't the same LSU team. And the same could be said for Georgia. The same could be said for Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State. All these teams, they dealt with injuries. They're figuring out who they are. So, we could be watching Ohio State the first and second month of the season and going, they aren't the number 1 team, but they could look a whole lot better in this last month. So every team evolves, and whether they evolve for good or for worse is a different thing entirely. USC, they devolve. They don't evolve, they devolve. Whereas, go ahead.
And this will lead us into his next segments, because I want to talk about these 2 Big 12 matchups. But you look at 2 teams that are evolving in the Big 12 that host Oklahoma and Texas this week. Oklahoma State looked terrible, got smacked by South Alabama. They play Oklahoma. Kansas State looked bad, but they play Texas this week. We're going to talk about that after the break. Those are 2 teams that are now looking a lot better than they did 5 weeks ago, and those are going to be great games.